I used to think a ruined morning began with a missed meeting or a delayed shipment. Then my boss spilled his coffee on my bag and warned me, in the calmest voice imaginable, that small accidents can cost someone a career. That was the moment everything began to tilt. I was crossing the parking lot behind the Bright Cascade building in South Lake Union, juggling a stack of contracts for a vendor meeting, when Mark Cole swung his car a little too close. He braked late, stepped out with a paper cup in hand, and the coffee splashed across my tote. I muttered an apology, even though he was the one who cut the corner. He stared at the dark stain spreading across the fabric and smiled like it amused him. "You should be more careful. Marin," he said, "people who create problems, even small ones, eventually pay for them." I held the contracts tighter and walked off, pretending it did not bother me. It bothered me. By noon, I was downtown meeting a supplier, trying to focus on the numbers, but I could not shake his tone. When I came back to the office 2 hours later, my door was slightly open. My desk drawer sat crooked, and my laptop had been moved. I froze. Then I remembered the tiny camera I had tucked behind the vent grill 2 weeks earlier. I shut the door, sat down, and opened the app on my phone. The footage loaded. There was Mark, stepping inside with a key card he should not have. Another manager followed him. They went through my files, opened folders, copied documents, and whispered about cleaning up evidence before she notices. My pulse thudded as I replayed it, making sure I understood what I was looking at. That night, at the Aurelius Dynamics Gala, Mark spotted me across the ballroom and sneered. "What gives you the right to attend this luxury event?" I did not answer him. I walked straight to Avery Keaton, the CEO of Aurelius, and handed him my phone. He watched the recording without blinking, then pulled out his own phone. "Prepare the files," he typed. "We now have enough evidence to sue." He turned to Mark. "See you in court." And suddenly the smallest accident of the morning was no longer small at all. I used to think only paranoid people documented everything. Then the small things at work started shifting. Just enough to feel wrong, but not enough to confront anyone. 2 weeks before the raid, I opened my office drawer and found it half shut. I remembered locking it the night before. I stood there staring at it when Julia from HR passed by and said, "Marin, you really should keep your area secure. We've had complaints. Complaints from who I asked." She shrugged. "Just be mindful. That's all." The next morning, my project folder for the Aurelius account was missing. When I asked the operations desk if anyone had checked it out, Luis from IT came over quietly. "There were 4 unauthorized login attempts on your profile last night." He murmured, "All denied, but that does not usually happen." I said, "Should I be worried?" He hesitated. "If I were you, I would back up everything." Later that week, during a late shift, a junior analyst named Rowan poked his head into my doorway. "Marin, close your laptop. I need to tell you something." I turned to him. "What's going on?" He lowered his voice. "Mark is pushing for a restructuring. He is trying to get rid of certain people quietly. You did not hear this from me." I stared at him. "And I am on that list." His silence answered before he could. That night, I bought a micro camera the size of a thumbnail. The next morning, I unscrewed the vent above my desk, climbed onto a chair, and slid the device inside. When Mark walked by and asked what I was doing, I kept my tone neutral. "Temperature issues." "I am checking airflow." He nodded and moved on. As I tightened the vent cover, I heard my father's voice in my head, the one steady thing I missed every day. "Keep receipts, kid. Not everyone plays fair." I did not know what I would catch on that camera. I only knew I needed proof long before anyone realized I was gathering it. I opened the footage expecting a mistake, maybe a janitor or someone from maintenance. Instead, I saw Mark step into my office with a master key, the door closing behind him like he owned the place. He looked around, then waved another manager inside. It was Trevor, the one who avoided eye contact with me for weeks. Trevor whispered, "We should not be here this long." Mark snapped back, then moved faster. I watched him pull open my drawer, flipping through contracts tied to Aurelius Dynamics as if they belonged to him. Pages hit the desk in sharp slaps. Trevor said, "These are all signed under her authority." Mark replied, "Not for long." He took out a personal USB. I saw the small light blink as he plugged it into my laptop. Trevor's voice shook. "Copying their files. This is dangerous." Mark did not look at him. "If she cannot defend herself, HR will bury her. It will look clean. Just focus." My jaw tightened. I could hear my own breathing over the video audio. Trevor tried again. "What if she catches on Mark shot him a glare?" "She will not. By Monday, she will be gone." They went through my folders like they had planned it for days. Mark tucked papers into his jacket, checked the hallway twice, and whispered, "This ends tonight." I sat perfectly still, my fingers numb around the phone. No shouting, no panic, just a cold, precise shift inside me. I backed up the entire recording to my secure cloud and saved another copy on an encrypted drive. My office had not just been searched. They were preparing to erase me, and the proof was right there in my hands. Mark spotted me the moment I stepped into the ballroom. His expression tightened like the sight of me ruined his night. He moved closer, lowering his voice just enough to sound polite to anyone watching. "What gives you the right to attend this luxury gala?" he said. "This is not your crowd." "Marin." I met his stare. "Aurelius Dynamics invited me." He laughed under his breath. "Of course they did. They always mistake quiet people for valuable ones." A few guests turned their heads. Mark enjoyed that. Attention fed him, but I felt steady, almost calm, like I had been waiting for this moment without realizing it. I stepped around him and made my way toward Avery Keaton, the CEO of Aurelius Dynamics. He stood near the stage, speaking with a retired colonel. When he saw me, he broke into a warm, respectful nod. "Marin Hollis," he said. "I have not seen you since that winter route issue." I smiled. "The blizzard year." He chuckled. "You rerouted an entire supply chain in 4 hours. I have not forgotten." Mark hovered behind me, close enough to hear but too far to interrupt. Avery's acknowledgement irritated him more than anything I could have said. Avery asked, "How are things at Bright Cascade?" Still carrying the heaviest loads quietly, I felt my throat tighten. "A lot has changed lately." Avery studied my face, changed how I glanced at Mark. He smirked, confident I would not risk speaking in front of him. So I made a different choice. "Avery," I said, lowering my voice, "there is something you need to see. It concerns your contracts. And my office." Avery's expression sharpened. "Show me." I reached into my clutch for my phone. Tonight was the moment. Avery took my phone without hesitation. "Play it," he said. I tapped the screen. The footage appeared Mark unlocking my office door, Trevor stepping in behind him, both of them rifling through my things. Avery leaned in slightly, watching every movement, every whispered line. Trevor's voice came through first. "This is too much." "Mark," Mark answered. "If she cannot defend herself, HR will bury her. Keep going." Avery did not blink. His warmth vanished, replaced by the same controlled sharpness I had seen military officers use when something crossed a line. He handed my phone back. "Marin," he said, "this is a breach involving federal contracts." Mark finally noticed Avery's expression and stepped closer. "Sir." "I can explain." Avery raised one hand, cutting him off. "You will not speak to me." The donors around us grew quiet, sensing the tension. Avery pulled out his own phone and typed with deliberate precision, "Prepare the files. We have enough evidence to proceed." Mark froze. "Avery, this is a misunderstanding." "It is not," Avery replied. "You accessed protected materials belonging to Aurelius Dynamics. You attempted to undermine a key coordinator, and you did all of it on camera." Mark moved toward me, but 2 members of hotel security shifted subtly, blocking his path. He stopped short, breathing hard, eyes darting between Avery and me. Avery put his phone away. I have notified our legal team. You will be contacted soon. Do not attempt to leave the city without informing counsel. Mark swallowed hard. You are making a mistake. No, Avery said. You did. He turned and walked away, speaking briefly with a board member as he headed for the exit. The room buzzed with whispers. Mark stayed rooted to the floor. I held my phone tightly, knowing the night was only beginning. By the time I stepped into Bright Cascade the next morning, the building felt wrong. Doors slammed too quickly. Conversations stopped the second I passed. Someone whispered my name like it was a warning. Mark's voice echoed from the end of the hallway. Find out who talked to Aurelius. Now! His footsteps hit the floor in sharp bursts, followed by the frantic shuffle of someone trying to keep up. HR clustered near the conference room, papers in hand, eyes darting everywhere. Julia finally spotted me. Marin, we need to speak with you. Immediately. I walked inside without a word. 3 chairs waited at the table, along with a sealed envelope. Sit, Julia said softly. This is a delicate situation. I sat. No expression. No reaction. She cleared her throat. There has been confusion regarding your status at Bright Cascade. To avoid further disruption, we believe it is best if you submit a voluntary resignation. It will protect your reputation. I stared at the envelope. A resignation I never offered. Marin, she whispered, if you sign, everyone moves on. No investigation, no escalation. The door cracked open. Luis from IT slipped inside and stood behind me, pretending to check the projector cable. He murmured, barely audible. They held a midnight meeting. Mark ordered them to push your exit through as voluntary. He is terrified of the Aurelius footage. Julia's smile sharpened. This is the cleanest path for all parties. I folded my hands. Your clean path is based on a lie. She froze. Another HR rep tried to jump in. We just want to resolve this before it becomes a scandal. A scandal, I asked. Or evidence. The room shifted. Voices stumbled. Julia tried again. Marin, we can negotiate. 3 months of compensation. I stayed silent. Silence made them sweat. Footsteps thundered outside. Someone called out. Aurelius Legal sent another notice to the board. Chairs scraped. HR flinched. Mark barked from the hallway. Nobody signs anything without me. I stood slowly, the envelope untouched. Panic was spreading fast, and none of it was mine. I walked into the executive conference room with a single folder in my hand. Mark was already inside, pacing like a man waiting for a verdict. HR sat stiffly at the far end of the table. 2 vice presidents whispered near the window, their voices shaky. Julia gestured toward a chair. Marin, let us know, I said. I am not here to listen. I am here to present something. Mark scoffed. She is trying to stall. She knows she is done. I opened the folder and slid the first page across the table. This is the continuity designation contract. Aurelius Dynamics signed it with Bright Cascade 4 years ago. My name is listed as protected personnel. Removing me without cause violates federal continuity regulations. A VP leaned closer. Where did you get this? It was issued to me, I said. I kept my copy. Julia's face paled. This cannot be accurate. We have no record because Mark deleted it. I replied. You approved every change he asked for. Mark slammed his hand on the table. She fabricated this. She probably printed it last night. I kept my voice steady. There are 3 signatures from senior leadership, all verified. And Aurelius Dynamics already confirmed the document was never voided. The room went silent. Then the door opened. Luis from IT stepped inside with a portable drive in his hand. You might want to see this, he said. These are the access logs from the past month, including the ones Mark ordered us to alter. Mark froze. Luis, get out. Luis stood his ground. The logs show every deletion request, every unauthorized file pull, every attempt to erase the continuity clause from the system, a VP whispered. This is a federal violation, Julia whispered back. We are exposed. I stepped aside as the board members surrounded the table. One of them said, Suspend his access, now. Mark lunged toward the logs. You do not understand. Security pushed the door wider and stepped in. The decision had been made. Security arrived within minutes. 2 officers stepped into the conference room, their presence quiet but final. One of them said, Mark Cole, please come with us. Mark backed away from the table. You cannot be serious. I am the head of operations. A board member answered, Not anymore. They escorted him out, his protests echoing down the hallway. I followed behind at a distance, not because I wanted to watch, but because the hallway was the only way back to my office. Mark kept turning over his shoulder, looking for someone to defend him, but no one moved. In the lobby, security released him long enough for him to grab his phone. He dialed my number immediately. My screen lit up with his name. I answered. Marin Hollis. His voice shook. We can fix this. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. There is no misunderstanding, I said. You do not have to let them do this, he whispered. You know how much damage this will cause. Your consequences are not mine to carry. There was a long breath on the other end. Please. I hung up. The lobby fell silent. Even the receptionist stopped typing. Within hours, news outlets began calling Bright Cascade, asking for statements about internal misconduct tied to federal contracts. By late afternoon, a local business reporter stood outside the building, broadcasting live. Employees lingered near windows, watching the headline scroll across the screen. Bright Cascade under legal scrutiny after contract breach allegations. The next morning, Aurelius Dynamics released a short public statement. We have initiated an ongoing legal review regarding a breach of continuity protocol involving Bright Cascade Logistics. No names, no details. But the implication was enough to send Bright Cascade stock tumbling. Department heads whispered behind closed doors. HR stayed off the hallways entirely. Everyone avoided everyone else, afraid of becoming the next person pulled into a conference room. By evening, the building felt hollow, not quiet hollow, and in that hollow space, I realized something had shifted permanently inside the company and inside me. In the days after everything fell apart, Avery called me twice. Each time, his message was the same. Marin, when you are ready, Aurelius has a place for you. I appreciated it, but I could not walk into another building carrying the same weight I had been dragging for years. I told him, I need time. He replied, take as long as you need. So I stepped back. I spent my mornings walking the loop around Green Lake, letting the gray Seattle air settle into something quieter. I left my phone on silent. No calendar pings, no project deadlines, just the sound of water and the steady rhythm of my footsteps. One afternoon, a former colleague, Leah, called. Everyone's asking about you. She said, some people are proud. Others are scared. I do not want people to be scared. I told her, they are not scared of you. She said, they are scared of the truth you proved. Over the next week, emails began coming in from companies I had barely interacted with. A logistics firm from Tacoma wrote, we heard how you handled a high-pressure breach. Would you ever consider consulting a small supply chain group in Portland reached out with something similar? I reread each message twice, not with disbelief, but with a strange, steady calm. When Avery called again, I said, I think I know what I want. He waited. I want to build something independent. I said, not another corporate title. I want to help companies protect themselves the right way. He exhaled softly. Then that is exactly what you should do. I spent the next several days setting up my new path continuity consulting, ethical logistics, training teams to protect what matters before someone like Mark gets the chance to twist it. Late one night, an email arrived from an address I did not recognize. The subject line read, "You helped us more than you know." It was from 3 members of Mark's former team. The message was short. "Thank you for showing us what accountability looks like." I stared at the screen for a long time before typing my reply. When the regulatory board released its findings, the headline spread quietly through the industry. Mark Cole was barred from holding any management position for 5 years. No sensational interviews, no dramatic statement from him, just a single line at the bottom of the report: "Violations confirmed." Leah called me the same morning. "They demoted Julia," she said. "Trevor was let go. HR is getting rebuilt from the ground up." I listened, not out of satisfaction, but because it felt like history finally acknowledging what it had overlooked. "They should have listened sooner," I said. Leah exhaled. "At least someone finally did." Later that week, I met with a small committee from the Seattle University Continuing Education Program. A professor introduced himself. "We have been following your work. We want you to teach a workshop on ethical leadership in high-risk logistics." I blinked. "You want me to teach?" "Yes," he said. People need to hear from someone who lived it, not just studied it. It was not something I had imagined myself doing, but the offer felt right, like a door opening without force. "I will do it," I said. After the meeting, I returned to the small office I had rented in Ballard for my new consulting work. A cardboard package sat at the door. No name. No return address. Inside was a single printed still image, the frame from the hidden camera footage where Mark stood in the doorway of my office. The moment everything tilted, I placed it on my desk for a long moment before hanging it on the wall. Not as a trophy, not as revenge, just as a line I would never let anyone cross again. Avery called that evening. "How does it feel?" "Marin." "Everything finally settling. Quiet," I said. "The good kind." He paused. "Quiet victories last longer." I smiled. "Yes, they do." When I locked up my office that night, the memory of the spilled coffee in the parking lot drifted back the warning he had whispered about small accidents costing careers. He was right about one thing. A small moment did change a career, just not in the way he expected. What would you do if you overheard your own downfall being planned? I still remember Vincent's voice, low, certain, a little too calm to belong to someone talking about a living, breathing employee. I had walked back into the office for my forgotten phone. The hallway dim, except for the glow under the conference room door. I heard my name, and that's what made me pause. "By the next quarter," Vincent was saying, "we'll phase Alara out. Too independent. She's holding the product hostage." The investor laughed, the sound short and sharp. "She built the engine." "Didn't she?" Vincent replied. "Yes, but the code's already in-house. Once we replicate it, we'll be fine." That sentence hit harder than any insult could have. Replicate it. As if the years of unpaid nights, the thousands of lines of neural architecture I'd written alone, could just be copied. I stayed there, listening until their voices blurred into static in my head. Then I turned, walked to my desk, and sat down. I opened my laptop, stared at the running logs of the system I'd built, and began to plan. When my coworker Darren stopped by and asked if I was joining them for lunch, I said quietly, "No, not today." He didn't ask why. Most people at Electrosystems had already learned not to ask questions that might involve Vincent. That night, at home, I opened a fresh notebook, the kind with numbered pages, and wrote the date in block letters. Under it, I made the first entry: proof of Origin Genesis core developed independently between March and September 2019. Personal equipment only. My hand trembled once, then steadied. The anger was still there, but it had shifted. I no longer wanted to confront him. I wanted documentation. By midnight, the plan was taking shape, quiet, deliberate, built with the same precision as every system I'd ever written. 7 months. That's how long I gave myself. And when the time came, Vincent would learn what it meant to underestimate the woman he'd tried to erase. How do you prove something the world already believes belongs to someone else? The morning after I overheard Vincent, I arrived before anyone else. The office lights were still off, the servers humming like they always did when no one was listening. I opened my laptop and began pulling every version of my code from backup drives, copying them to a private external server. Each folder got a timestamp, each line of code a note my initials, the date, the location. By noon, the office filled with noise. Derek, my former intern, walked by holding 2 coffees. "Big meeting today," he said, smirking. "Vincent wants a demo for investors. I'm sure you'll make it shine," I said, keeping my voice even. He hesitated. "You're not in the deck this time. He wants me to lead." I nodded, pretending to be fine. Inside, I was memorizing every word. That evening, I opened my old livestream account, the one I'd used years ago when I coded through nights fueled by instant noodles and fear of failure. The videos were still there. My voice, explaining neural mapping models line by line, time-stamped months before Electra systems even existed. Proof, hidden in plain sight. I downloaded every stream, every file, every chat log where other developers asked questions, and I answered under my username, Elara Q. At 2 in the morning, I started scanning invoices equipment I'd bought with my own credit card long before I was hired the high-performance GPU, the personal cloud subscription, the ergonomic keyboard I'd used until the letters wore off. Each receipt went into a folder marked Personal Resources Non-Corporate. When the files reached 3 gigabytes, I backed them up again, on an encrypted drive stored in my freezer beneath a bag of blueberries. I laughed softly at the absurdity of it, hiding my life's work beside frozen fruit. The fear I'd felt the day before had cooled into something steadier. I wasn't just documenting. I was building a case, line by line, like a system only I could architect. And soon. I'd need someone who knew exactly how to make it bulletproof. What if the law could be your quietest weapon? I met Marina Locke in a downtown cafe that smelled like rain and burnt espresso. She arrived carrying a laptop bag and a calm that made me instantly trust her. When she spoke, her voice was low and measured, like someone who spent her life dissecting the fine print of other people's arrogance. "I've reviewed your contract," she said, sliding her glasses higher on her nose. "You signed as a contractor before your employment began, correct?" I nodded. 3 months before Electra Systems was officially registered. She smiled slightly. "Then, the company owns what you built using company resources during assigned hours. The key phrase, Elara, is during assigned hours. You created the core framework before you had any—" I felt a pulse of disbelief. "You mean, legally? It's still mine." "Not just legally," she said, provably. "You documented everything. It's immaculate." She paused, eyes flicking across the screen. "You're meticulous rare in people who get betrayed." I laughed softly. Obsession has its uses. Marina leaned forward. "You need to protect the work now, before they realize what they've signed. Incorporate a holding entity, something clean. We'll call it Quinn Axiom LLC. Assign the intellectual property to it, backdated to when the code was written." Entirely lawful. I stared at the draft articles of incorporation as she typed, my name beside founder and chief technical officer. The words steadied me. "And what happens when they discover it?" I asked. "They won't," Marina said, eyes glinting. "Because they'll sign it again. We'll bury the acknowledgement clause in your next compliance documentation. Page 267, subsection C, dense, technical, invisible to an executive who believes he's smarter than everyone in the room." Her tone was clinical, almost detached, but I felt something electric beneath it, precision disguised as patience. As we stood to leave, she added quietly, "You're not taking revenge. Elara, you're restoring balance. For the first time in weeks, I felt the air ease inside my chest. That night, I began rewriting the document that would change everything. How do you watch someone sign away their empire with a single pen stroke? Friday afternoons at Electrosystems always smelled like espresso and deadlines. Vincent Hale hated staying past 5, so anything that required his signature had to be dropped on his desk before his weekend rounds of golf. I waited outside his glass office, holding the thick compliance packet that contained my heartbeat on page 267. "Come in," he said without looking up. His jacket was already off. Tie loosened. "Is that the Department of Defense documentation?" "Yes," I said evenly. "Routine certification update." Marina confirmed it aligns with the new version. Vincent nodded. "Good. Leave it here. I'll sign before I go." He flipped the first few pages, then scrawled his signature fast, practiced, uninterested. My stomach tightened. "Need me to witness?" I asked, pretending to glance at my watch. He grinned. "Sure. Why not? Makes it official." He kept signing, pen scratching through pages that took me 2 weeks to perfect. I could see his reflection in the glass, relaxed, confident, utterly unaware. When he reached the middle of the packet, he paused. "This looks different from last quarter." "Formatting updates?" I said quickly. "New security protocol layout. Legal wanted it standardized." "Fine," he said, and kept signing. His phone buzzed twice. Each time, he answered without stopping. I watched him initial the final page of Section 8.7, the one Marina had drafted word for word. Foundational architecture developed by Ilara Quinn between March and September 2019 on personal equipment remains the intellectual property of the developer. He signed directly beneath it. "Good work, Ilara," he said, capping his pen. "We'll need your team ready for the investor demo next week." "Of course," I replied. My voice didn't shake, though my hands ached too. As I left his office, I memorized the last motion of his wrist, the flourish that sealed his own fate. By the time the elevator doors closed, I had already texted Marina a single word. Done. What's worse, losing your work or watching others take credit for it? The first thing to disappear was my name. It vanished from the internal build notes 2 weeks after Vincent signed the document, then from the slide decks, then from the product roadmap. By the 3rd week, Derek was presenting my algorithms as a collaborative evolution under his leadership. He caught me outside the conference room one morning, his face red with excitement. "The investors loved the demo," he said. "Vincent said the system finally feels stable." I looked at him. "That's because I built it stable." He laughed nervously. "Yeah, of course. But, you know, I refined it." I wanted to tell him refinement meant changing 2 color themes and breaking 1 integration, but I didn't. I just nodded, watching him run off to a meeting I used to lead. That afternoon, my badge stopped granting me access to the testing environment. It claimed it was a permissions refresh. When I asked Vincent, he smiled. "Standard process. Ilara, you're moving into more of an advisory role." "Without system access," I said. He didn't answer. By the end of the month, I was sitting at my desk surrounded by people who wouldn't look at me. Conversations ended when I entered the kitchen. The new interns whispered my name like it belonged to a ghost story. Marina called late one night. "You're quiet," she said. "I'm watching them erase me in real time." I replied. "Good," she said softly. "Let them. Every keystroke they make now builds on what you legally own. They're writing your proof for you." I held on to her words the next morning when HR requested an updated job description. "We're restructuring," Amanda said, avoiding eye contact. "Nothing personal." I smiled, signing the form. Of course. Nothing ever is. That evening, I packed the last of my things: 1 notebook, 1 mug, a flash drive that no one noticed had been in my drawer since the beginning. I shut down my computer, feeling the silence stretch around me. They thought they were cutting me out. In truth, they were setting the fuse. If you knew the exact moment you'd be fired, how would you spend the night before the email arrived at 8:47 p.m.? Mandatory meeting, conference room Aurora, 9:30 a.m. I stared at the screen for a full minute before closing it. No surprise. No panic, only a clock starting to tick. I opened my terminal and ran a final system check. Credential monitor active. Patent scripts queued. Licensing notifications verified. Every response line blinked green. Marina's voice echoed in my head from our last call. When the lights go out, Ilara, let the system speak for you. I poured myself a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago and sat by the window. The city outside looked quiet, like nothing was about to change. I thought about the years I had given this company the nights without sleep, the birthdays I missed, the apologies I never sent. For a moment, the anger softened. Then I remembered Vincent's voice saying phase her out, and the calm returned sharper than before. My phone buzzed. A message from Marina: all filings are synced. If they revoke access, the timer begins. I typed back, understood. See you on the other side, at 1 I shut my laptop, cleared my desk, and left only the essentials in my bag. My ID badge, my notebook, and a flash drive with the backups. By dawn, I was already dressed, navy suit, hair pulled back, eyes steady. I walked through the quiet streets toward the office, the air damp with morning rain. At my desk, I opened a clean page in my notebook and wrote one line in block letters. 9:30, end of one story, start of another. The office lights flickered on. Around me, keyboards began to clatter. Phones rang. Small talk filled the air. No one noticed the countdown that had already begun. At 9:15, I took a slow sip of my second coffee and looked at the clock. 15 minutes left. My system was ready. My body was calm. My replacement, somewhere upstairs, was probably rehearsing his lines. How do you keep your hands from shaking when someone steals your life to your face? At 9:30 sharp, I walked into conference room Aurora. The blinds were half closed, the light thin and gray. Amanda from HR sat at the end of the table, a folder already open. Vincent Hale stood by the window, pretending to be busy with his phone. Ilara, he said, forcing a smile. Thanks for coming on short notice. I sat down, placing my notebook neatly on the table. Of course. You said it was important. Amanda cleared her throat. This will be brief. The company has decided to move in a new direction. Effective immediately, your employment with Electra Systems is terminated. She began reading a paragraph about property returns, non-disclosure obligations, and severance review. I could hear the rehearsed sympathy in her tone. Vincent stepped closer. Voice softened. This isn't personal, Ilara. You've made significant contributions, but the board believes the next phase needs fresh leadership. I looked up at him. You mean Derek? He hesitated, then nodded. He's done great work integrating your framework. My framework, I repeated quietly. He shifted, uncomfortable. You'll receive final paperwork by end of day. Amanda slid the envelope toward me. Security will assist with your departure. As her words faded, my phone vibrated once in my pocket. 9:31. Access revoked. I signed the form without reading it. You have everything you need. Then Vincent smiled faintly. Yes. Thank you for handling this professionally. I rose slowly, collecting my notebook. I always do. By the time I reached the elevator, the second vibration came 9:32. The cascade had begun. 43 patent filings, automatic notifications, and licensing activations, all moving silently through encrypted channels. Luis, one of the security guards, waited near the doors. I'm sorry, Ms. Quinn, he said quietly. I smiled at him. Don't be. You're just doing your job. The elevator doors closed. My hands were steady. My system was alive. Upstairs, they thought they'd erased me. They had no idea they'd just triggered my beginning. What's 17 minutes worth when 5 years of work are on the line? At 9:47, I was standing in line at the cafe across the street, holding a cup that had gone cold before I even paid for it. My phone buzzed once. A text from Marina Live. The word felt heavier than any sentence she could have written. Inside Electra Systems, the cascade was unfolding exactly as planned. Build queues were freezing, license verifications failing. My former team was probably staring at screens flashing access denied, wondering why the foundation they stood on had suddenly vanished. Another buzz. Marina again. Patent confirmations filed. 43 complete. I exhaled slowly. Around me, no one knew that the intellectual property once buried under Electra's name now belonged to Quinn Axiom LLC, valued at over $500 million. My life's work had come home. At 9:51, my phone rang. Vincent. I let it ring. At 9:53. Again. At 9:55. Amanda from HR. I silenced it. By 10. I'd barely sat down when the cafe door burst open. Vincent Hale, hair disheveled, face pale, spotted me immediately. He walked straight to my table. "Ilara," he said, voice cracking. "We have a serious issue. Our systems, everything's locked. The builds won't deploy." I looked up. "Then you should probably read your compliance documents. Page 267, subsection C." His eyes flickered. "You tricked me." "No," I said softly. "You signed without reading." "That's not the same thing." He dropped into the chair across from me. "You've sabotaged us. This is corporate theft. It's ownership." I corrected. 5 years of unpaid nights. Code written before you even had a company. You just never noticed who built your empire. Vincent's phone buzzed again. The screen lighting with names I recognized: investors, journalists, panic. He looked at me, voice lower now. "What do you want?" "Nothing," I said. "I already have it." He sat back, defeated. At 10:03, I received one final message from Marina. "Congratulations. Founder." I raised my cup, taking a slow sip. The coffee was cold, but the victory burned warm enough. How do you negotiate with someone who finally realizes what you're worth? 2 days after the cafe confrontation, Vincent requested a meeting. He didn't say please, but his tone had lost all its polish. Marina and I arrived first, sitting across a long glass table in a conference room borrowed from her firm. She poured herself water, calm as a surgeon before an operation. Vincent entered, carrying a folder that looked heavier than paper should. His tie was gone, his eyes hollow. "Ilara," he began, "we're willing to discuss terms." "Then let's discuss," I said. He hesitated. "We need the systems back online immediately. Our investors." 30% of gross revenue, I said. Attribution on every patent, release note, and investor document. Full acknowledgement of ownership. Immediate restoration of the license under Quinn Axiom LLC. He blinked. 30%. "That's absurd." "Absurd," Marina said quietly, "is using someone's property for 5 years without paying for it." Vincent's mouth tightened. "You could ruin us." "I could," I said, "but I'd rather get paid." He flipped open his folder, voice cracking under the weight of the numbers. "We can offer 8%, capped at $50 million. Marina didn't speak. She just looked at me. I leaned forward. "You'll keep every engineer employed. Your product won't collapse. Your investors will calm down. You'll pay 30% no cap. I'm not here to destroy Electra. I'm here to make sure it finally values what built it." Vincent rubbed his temples. "You're asking for a lifetime share. I'm asking for fairness." Silence filled the room. Finally, he looked at Marina. "You're not going to give an inch, are you?" "She doesn't have to," Marina replied. "You already signed once." He stared at the paper in front of him for a long time. Then he picked up the pen. This time, he read every word. When he finished, he set the pen down and whispered, "You win." I shook my head. "No, Vincent, I just stopped losing." Marina collected the signed document and slipped it into her briefcase. For the first time, I allowed myself to breathe. What does victory look like when you no longer need applause? 6 months later, the office of Axiom Technologies was small but alive. The walls hummed with energy, not ego. Half the engineers were people Electra had overlooked: quiet builders, problem solvers, minds that never made it onto slide decks. We worked long hours, but they were our hours. Every contract, every patent, every commit carried a name beside it. Vincent's firm survived. They paid their 30% on time, every quarter. Sometimes I'd see his name in industry articles, all softened by words like partnership and settlement. Marina sent me the payment confirmations without comment. We didn't need to talk about him anymore. One afternoon, a young developer named Sonia stopped by my desk. She was new, barely 23, hair pulled into a nervous knot. "Can I ask something?" she said. "Always." I replied. "What do I do if someone takes credit for my work? Not this team, but anywhere. If it happens." I closed my laptop. "You document everything. You keep your logs, your messages, your drafts. And when they try to erase you, you'll already have proof that you existed." She nodded slowly. "That's what you did, isn't it?" "Yes," I said, "but it's better if you never have to." That night, after everyone left, I stayed behind. The office was quiet except for the hum of servers running code I owned in name and soul. I thought of the years at Electra, of the humiliation, the silence, the moment my badge went dead, and how all of it had led here. Marina called just before midnight. "Your quarterly transfer cleared," she said. I smiled. "Good. Let's use it for the mentorship fund." She paused, still giving it away. "Not giving," I said softly. "Investing in people who deserve better." After the call, I looked at the glowing screens one last time before turning out the lights. The code, the company, the story. It was all mine now, and for the first time, that felt like enough.